Vice President J.D. Vance discussed Pizzagate last night when asked about the Epstein files. We're going to go through the article first from the corporate press, the mainstream MSN.com point of view, and then we're going to break down Pizzagate, and we're going to put it in context with the history of child trafficking. You know how I feel about it, and you know how I feel about Vance. But look, I will champion it anytime someone says they should be investigating these things. That's great. I don't really believe him because I think he's hillbilly Obama, and he was created in a test tube by Peter Thiel, his dad, his tech dad. That said, it's good anytime we can put a spotlight on the worst crimes and hopefully get some accountability. But I don't always believe it. I don't ever believe anything this guy says. That's just me. You guys are free to disagree, and I'd love to hear you out. I just think he's a snake oil salesman, like most politicians. But to me, it's very obvious with him. Anyway, let's get into this. What I want to do with this episode is just have like a vessel that we can share with anybody that mocks the idea of Pizzagate. It's become the butt of jokes, and it shouldn't have. But that was the reason. That was what they did. They did that on purpose, to be able to mock everybody who thinks that there are satanic pedophiles that are for sure in DC, but also spread across the country and the world at large. They mock you. They take something out of context and they use it against you. And they say, you're a conspiracy theorist for believing that children are being trafficked or hurt. Well, they are. We know this. This is an ancient crime, an ancient evil. It's been going on since the fall of man. And we're going to get into all that. But I wanted to have just one container of all of this information to the best of my ability. I threw this thing together and just wanted to have it be like, okay, you think Pizzagate is fake, or you don't take it seriously, or you think you should mock this? Here you go. Watch this, and then get back to me. Free to disagree. Free to think it's fringe or it's conspiracy theory, although I'm sure a lot of you who tune in take this very seriously. But I'm also sure you have friends or family who don't, or who write it off, or who just look at the mainstream headlines that write this kind of thing off. So from MSN.com, from 3 minutes ago from when I'm recording this, Pizzagate explained, the debunked 2016 conspiracy theory. J.D. Vance now calls for investigation. So what I also find interesting about this is, so last night they're having this, it was supposed to be J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Erica Kirk. And then she backed out because of alleged death threats. Now, look, death threats are real. I get it. I've gotten them. I've had to go to the police about a few. And then, working at Timcast over the years, there's been quite a few crazy situations with bomb sniffing robots and bomb sniffing dogs and all that good stuff. But I take it seriously, and I know there are people who want you dead. My contention is that I don't know if they're all leftists. Certainly, there are violent leftists, violent Marxist death cult leftists who are insane. They'll chop off their genitals. They want you dead. They don't care if they die. They're nihilists. They're godless. We know that's real. I also know that people on the right or from the uniparty take advantage of those situations and then install a patsy or a fall guy to carry out some violence, to help perpetuate their narrative. Unfortunately, we have to think about those things, at the balance, the very real reality that is how these places operate. It's unfortunate. So it's just funny to me, outside of the seriousness of wanting to keep everyone safe, that these people, I don't say these people, I'm not sure if Vance, I don't know what Erica has said about Candace or what Vance has said about Candace, honestly. But people in their circle have certainly condemned Candace, or they hold her accountable, which I think is ridiculous. You can disagree with Candace all you want, but she has every right to have all these questions. So I have lots of similar questions. But it's okay to talk about Pizzagate then last night at this thing. But how dare you question the official story surrounding Charlie's murder, which is so clearly insane. And now there's theories going around about, Tyler Robinson maybe understood he was going to be a patsy. These are just theories. and then he turned himself in a way where he wouldn't die in a shootout, which is how a lot of different scenarios do turn out, which I sometimes think, as I've said many times on the show before, were they not the shooter? And this is at multiple shootings throughout the last decade that I've just been tracking. And were they killed to cover up the fact that they weren't the shooter? I think that's very possible. But isn't that interesting? We can entertain Pizzagate now. The vice president, we are in crazy times. The vice president can entertain Pizzagate when he's being grilled about Epstein files, as he should have. Every president, every vice president, I don't care who you are, you deserve to be heckled. You work for us. And if you're failing, you're going to be heckled, and you should answer. We have the right to ask you any question. And if you squirm, good. So he was kind of squirming last night, but he's really good at like, oh, I'm a everyday man. I'm from Ohio. I'm from Appalachia. You're from a test tube in a Palantir lab, bro. All right. You are a tech bro, like chimera that was created in a lab. Peter Thiel donated the most money ever donated to a senator's campaign, or someone who wanted to become someone who's running for Senate. The most money ever came from Thiel to Vance because it's his Palantir dad. Anyway, I just think that's interesting. We can entertain Pizzagate all of a sudden at the highest level. But don't you dare ask questions. Don't you dare ask questions about what might have happened to Charlie in front of everybody in broad daylight. Anyway, Vice President J.D. Vance has publicly called for investigating someone linked to the debunked Pizzagate conspiracy theory. We're off to a great start. The debunked Pizzagate conspiracy theory, reviving claims that were thoroughly disproven by law enforcement nearly a decade ago. Well, I guess that's it. My time here is done. I'm out. Have a great day. And it once led a man with an assault rifle to open fire inside a Washington pizza restaurant. Speaking at a Turning Point USA event at the University of Georgia on Tuesday, Vance referenced emails from the recently released Epstein files. There's one email I read, and it's been a little while ago, but it was talking about, one person sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein saying, oh, there was some really nice like pizzas and grape sodas or something like that, he told the crowd. I was thinking about playing it, but it's a longer clip. Let me read a little more, and then I'm going to finish my thought there. And I remember, he said, it sounded like the Pizzagate conspiracy theory. But here it was in like an email from a guy, and my reaction to that was that we should absolutely investigate that person. Okay, fair enough. The vice president added, noting he would follow up to see whether that individual had been investigated. What it's leaving out of this quote, to follow up on the idea I want to finish there that I was having, is there's a moment in this answer that they negate here. They don't include it, where he tells the crowd, I'm probably more interested in this, I'm more obsessed in this than anyone else in, I think he says the government. If not the government, then maybe DC or something. But it's a way that he says it that just sounds like I'm going to ingratiate myself into this crowd that he knows is on the side of the person asking the question. They're getting cheers, right? And it was a good question. It was a long question, but it was a good question. And he, being a salesman and a performer, knows I've got to ingratiate myself. This is what we talk about all the time on the show. Why are conspiracy theories mainstream now? Why is it okay to entertain them? Why is it not taboo? And from these people, I think it's to ingratiate themselves into this quote unquote community of like dissenting voices. But what I hear is a salesman. And when I hear him talk like that, and I advise you to go look it up, I think it was like on some Forbes, I forget the website, on YouTube, some channel on YouTube I saw it. It was like a 4-minute clip. Watch it, walk away with your own thing, maybe even pause this for a second, go listen to it, and see what you think. Does he seem genuine to you? Maybe he does. To me, probably because I have already so much baggage of my feelings towards Silicon Valley politicians, DC, Epstein files, Peter Thiel, his Vance's book, his name changes. And the Never Trumper thing, people change. I also believe in redemption for people, and I know people change. People have changes of heart. That is normal. I have. I just spent yesterday talking about how I was an atheist for years, and I believe in Christ now and the awesome reality of the resurrection. I've had a pretty drastic change, so I understand people can change. I understand, we talked about sobriety yesterday. I understand people can be a drug addict or an alcoholic and they become sober. That said, there's something odd about Vance to me. But this isn't the point. The point I was going to make really quick before I continue is that when I was a furniture mover, we were in the process, this is towards the last 10 years, or the latter of the 10 years I worked there. So like probably the last 2 years of my decade-long job as a furniture mover, we were about to get bought out by this guy who's like, kind of like a startup guy. He seemed to have failed in the startup world, had a lot of money, and, he was tired of wearing a suit every day, and he just wanted to be out there in the field, which is cool. I respect that. But he certainly spoke to us like the way we thought we wanted to be talked to. So me and the dude I always worked with, who's a longtime friend, we have a lot of tattoos, we're tall, we look a certain way. And at that job, we looked like mostly scumbags, ripped jeans. We were just dirty all the time. We're moving old stuff, cobwebs all up in our hair, stink bugs everywhere, lifting like dead bats. I have one somewhere that's been petrified. His name's Edgar. He's in a little bat casket that my wife got. He's I'll find him one day. We'll show you Edgar. I found him in a house that Ulysses S. Grant used to live in Goshen, New York. Anyway, this guy saw us and was like, I need to speak a certain way. But like, we didn't speak that way. Like we liked literature and movies and music. And, we liked a lot of like gangster rap and death metal. But we didn't like speak, we didn't curse a lot. Even then, we didn't curse a lot. We didn't talk about like girls in a certain way. We didn't talk about like, we were, at that point, I was still with Nancy, but we were dating. And he was with his girlfriend who would become his wife. We didn't like talk like that. We didn't do the whole, what do they call it? Locker room talk, which has been never like anything appealing to me. We just didn't talk like that. But this guy saw us, saw the tattoos, and he thought this is how I talk to them. Maybe this is how he always talked, but you could tell he put it on because I would watch him. They call it code switching, right? I would see him code switch with like customers and stuff like this. So when I hear Vance talk, I think of that guy. And he was such a loser. He was just very condescending. And it was funny that he always felt like he had to talk about drugs or curse or all these things. And it was just kind of pathetic. And that's just my reference point when I hear a certain tone and someone who also comes from like the startup kind of tech world and who's a salesman. That's what I hear when I hear J.D. Vance. Someone who's constantly having to rebrand themselves, which happens. You could be like, well, you're a fan of Kanye West, and he's rebranded himself many times. It's a little different, but I get it. When I look at Kanye, I see someone who's doing it from a place of expression, not a place of I'm trying to get one over on people to elect me to then have power. So my tech daddy, Peter Thiel, can have even more power. Because Peter Thiel was starting Palantir, which was funded by the CIA around the time that the Patriot Act was created. So then they could create machines that would build out the surveillance state, that would control everyone, that would surveil everything at all times and scrape data off the internet and have total awareness all the time. When Kanye does it, it's just for an album. But look, you could disagree that you think it's authentic or inauthentic. And I've had, I wasn't down with the whole Vultures era with Kanye. Anyway, let's get back to the story. I forgot where I was. And I remember it sounded like the Pizzagate conspiracy. Pizzagate emerged during the 2016 presidential election after hackers accessed emails belonging to John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chair. Podesta's been mentioned on this show quite a bit lately because we have been talking about missing General McCaslin. We know there were emails through this leak. They don't say WikiLeaks, do they? Through the WikiLeaks. That's funny. They don't mention WikiLeaks. I wonder why. That's an interesting editorial decision. Interesting. But we know through WikiLeaks that Tom DeLonge, singer of Blink-182, Angels and Airwaves, was messaging John Podesta. I'm getting worked up about UFOs and a scientist engineer who knew about UFOs, and that was General McCaslin, which is why we've been talking about him. Why we've been talking about Podesta when it comes to missing General McCaslin. Proponents falsely claimed the messages contained coded references linking high-ranking Democratic officials to child sex trafficking ring supposedly operating from Comet Ping Pong, a pizzeria in Washington. Washington police and the FBI found no evidence to support the claims. Multiple fact-checkers reached the same conclusion. The theory spread rapidly through 4chan, Reddit, and Twitter before jumping to mainstream attention. The conspiracy's real-world consequences proved dangerous. On December 4th, 2016, Edgar Madison Welch, a 28-year-old from North Carolina, drove over for hours to the restaurant carrying an AR-15 rifle and a loaded revolver. He fired 3 shots into the restaurant, including one to break a locked door as he searched for evidence of child trafficking. Employees and customers fled. He found nothing and surrendered to the police. It also doesn't say that he shot a computer. Always an interesting detail. He got a computer. U.S. District Attorney. All right, I have a whole thing where I break this down more, and this is just kind of like the basic facts here, and I want to do like a better timeline of this. So let's move to that. And you probably know about Pizzagate, and maybe even more so than me. So what you think I miss, and things maybe I get wrong, or other theories that I am not thinking about, leave those below so that people who find this video later can like cross-reference and look through and be like, okay, he got that wrong. Go look here. Or you didn't remember this, or you negated this. So it can kind of become like a map of information below whatever I've missed or neglected to point out. So like the article was saying from MSN, Pizzagate started in late 2016 after WikiLeaks, released John Podesta's hacked emails. Believers claimed they contained coded language for a child sex trafficking ring run by top Democrats out of Comet Ping Pong, which is in D.C., and it's owned by James Alefantis, a Democratic donor. Alefantis, maybe? And I want to show you like 2 different angles, right? So there's the people who think there is something going on. And look, I don't know if there was. What I do know is that these things happen. And since we know these things happen, it's worth investigating. It's worth taking seriously. I would say don't bring a gun and shoot up a place. We don't want to hurt anybody. We want to rescue children and we want to do it right? It's like when I was with Alex Rosen, we're catching pedophiles. Why I like Alex and his tactics so much is he finds a way to get them to admit and to confess to all these crimes without beating them up. As much as my weak flesh wants to see mass destruction done to these people, and I don't agree with the death penalty, but the weak part of me is like, chop them down. But I would rather see them rot in jail forever. I think that's a harsher punishment. But while I was there looking at them in their faces, I was like imagining a bomb like falling on them, and there are other places that catch pedophiles just to beat them up. I get that urge. What Alex does is not beat them up. I mean, he might defend himself every now and then, but he gets them to confess so the cops can. Maybe every now and then, he does actually do a lot of this, but like some states are harder than others, depending on what you need and how confessions work, to get them convicted and then put away. That's important because beating someone up, these people are so sick and so effed up, so demonic that you beat them up, they're going to feel bad. They'll have some bruises. They're going to go right back. They're going to go right back to doing the evil. So that's what I'm saying. That's my point there. Like, maybe don't do what Welch did. But remember that. So again, I like to, when I can throughout this, remind you of like the skeptics side and the people who know this or believe this to be a reality. Because it's worth knowing the point of view of both. So for the people who know these things are going on, but the ones who really think that Comet Pizza was up to something, they saw pizza and food terms in emails as code for child porn. So from the Podesta emails, since cheese pizza can abbreviate to CP, and a handkerchief with a pizza-related map seemed suspicious. They pointed to Elephantis's, I'm going to say Elephantis from now on, Instagram posts of kids, actually his friends' children. That's in parentheses. So take that with a grain of salt. Not like it matters. Because we heard in the Epstein files that we had people bringing their children to the Epstein Island, which is a big screw up, in my humble opinion. Modern art in the restaurant they called disturbing or satanic, and symbols like triangles or spirals on signs that matched alleged pedophile codes. Remember, just put that on a shelf in the back of your brain right now, where they said alleged, or I'm saying alleged, because it's alleged. Okay, keep that on a shelf. They claimed a basement with tunnels for trafficking, satanic rituals, and linked it to elites like the Clintons and Podestas. Some still tied to Epstein files on broader elite cabals, seeing it as proof of hidden abuse networks. I will also say Tucker's been on record as saying he's seen the insides of the Podesta's house. I forget if it was John or the brother, but they have like very strange satanic art on display that appears to be like hurting children. So for the people who care about Snopes or New York Times, or fact checkers or police, mainstream outlets across the spectrum, they all called it baseless. Comet Ping Pong has no basement. It's a ground floor spot with ping pong tables. No victims came forward, no evidence or of trafficking, no police investigation found anything. Emails were just about actual food and events. Images were cherry-picked or from unrelated sources. What do you think? The symbols, in quotes, are common in logos and everywhere. It's spread through 4chan, Reddit, and then fake news sites with heavy confirmation bias. It peaked when a guy we know went and brought his gun there, Mr. Welch. Okay, let's go to Welch now. He was 28, from Salisbury, North Carolina, drove to Washington, D.C. on December 4th, 2016. So just think of that, okay? 2016, major. This is major. This is a month before the inauguration, right? That is a major turning point in American history, in modern American history. Just think how crazy that was for the country, everyone dealing with Trump. For the Trump 1.0, like everyone lost their minds. The media was completely insane. He was Hitler. He might have been worse than Hitler to a lot of the people in the media and his political opponents. Let's see. January, when was he inaugurated the first time? So January 20th. So a little over a month before the inauguration of Trump 1.0, this happened. And then also remember that like Trump had called in to Alex Jones. I don't think you could see him. I think he called in. And so now we're obviously post Sandy Hook, but the Sandy Hook thing is going to kick up now with Jones. Jones also does apologize for talking about Comet Pizza, which look, if you need to apologize, if you feel like you've done something wrong, own it. That's fine. We should teach our kids to apologize when they did something wrong. I just don't think it's wrong to question things. Don't tell anybody to go do anything crazy. But like, we have a history of crazy stuff. So anyway, there's a huge transition happening politically. And it seems like any chance the media industrial complex can weaponize itself against Trump, they can, and they want to make him look like a kook and a crazy person. And friends of Alex Jones, who will now be taken out, metaphorically, figuratively, it's kind of seriously, through lawfare, through the Sandy Hook situation, which was years earlier, but now it's like coming back. And now we get this person, Comet Pizza. And then think about how that looks in retrospect where we are now, with Trump kind of like calling Epstein a hoax, the really bad mishandling of the files and their release. It's just very interesting. So this happened at a very interesting time. And I say that because I have questions. Anyway, he had 3 loaded guns, an AR-15 rifle, a revolver, and a shotgun. He walked into Comet Ping Pong around 3 p.m. carrying the AR-15 and the revolver openly. Customers and staff, including kids, ran out screaming. He tried prying open a locked storage door with a butter knife, then fired 3 shots from the AR-15 into it, hitting the walls, a desk, and a computer. He also pointed the gun at an employee who walked back in carrying pizza dough. No one was hurt. After about 20 minutes, alone in the empty restaurant, he walked out unarmed and surrendered peacefully when police arrived. All right. He told cops he went to self-investigate because he believed kids were being held there as sex slaves. It's a terrible thought, and we should all want to rescue any children who are being held in such a way. And he saw himself as a hero rescuing them. In court, he pleaded guilty to transporting firearms across state lines and assault with a dangerous weapon. That phrase didn't become as mainstream as it would in just 4 years' time with Kyle Rittenhouse. And he took firearms over state lines. You should have rocket launchers if you want, and you should be able to carry them anywhere. That's just my opinion. But look at this. Maybe you don't know this, so I think it's insane. In June 2017, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson sentenced him to 4 years in prison, calling his recklessness breathtaking and saying only sheer luck kept anyone from dying. He paid over $5,000 in restitution for the damage and apologized, saying he'd been foolish and reckless. He got out in 2020 after serving his time. This past January 4th, 2025, police in Kannapolis, North Carolina, I'm sorry for my North Carolina friends if I'm saying that wrong, pulled over the car he was riding in on a probation violation warrant. When officers opened the door to arrest him, he pulled a handgun and pointed it at one of them. They ordered him to drop it. He didn't, and 2 officers shot him dead at the age of 36. So when I say sometimes when I think about this stuff, I wonder, was he real? And perhaps he was. People do crazy things. But when I talk about the timing, it's always so interesting. I always wonder, as we should all ask ourselves, who benefits the most? If this were real and he went to save kids who were being held as sex slaves, the children being freed would have benefited the most. But as far as we know, that was not the case. No one was freed, right? So then the people who I think could benefit the most, if it's not just someone who really believed they had to go save some children, then I think the people who hate Trump would benefit the most. Like J6, as I'm watching it unfold, being like, who benefits the most from this? This is interesting. This is not going to look good for Trump or his voters. It's going to look good for the establishment and, Joe Biden and Kamala and Pelosi, all these people. Mad Al, they'll be able to use it against Trump and his base, which obviously they did. And so, as a lot of us knew, as a lot of you knew, as we were watching J6 go down, we were like, I wonder how many people in that are real. And by real, of course, I mean our feds, our paid agitators. We knew that the night of. We maybe earlier from videos that came out, interviews. I mean, some of us were glued to the phone and the computer, watching in real time, like Antifa dress up with MAGA hats, with the red hats. So we knew that. So with that in mind, I then think about Welch, maybe a patsy. I don't know. Just theorizing here. You guys let me know what you think. But we've spoken extensively about Manchurian candidates, patsies, MK Ultra, right? So it is possible. It is possible that he was a mind-controlled patsy or a paid stooge. We also know about people being paid legit just to go protest. We know this. This is a little different, but it's worth considering. He did have an IMDb page, and he did do some amateur acting, like our astronaut who forgot her lines yesterday. So he was supposedly a crisis actor. The timing was a little convenient. It discredited the whole investigation right as it was blowing up. Something they love to do. Something real is emerging in the news. Do something that makes that look crazy and bogus, and then you can ridicule anyone who is still interested in the original story. It happens all the time. Some were saying that he was told to shoot specifically at a locked door to destroy a hard drive with evidence on it. That's what I was talking about with the computer earlier. There was a blogger, Joachim Hagopian, I don't know how to say his name, a conspiracy theorist, James Fetzer. This guy also had questions about Sandy Hook. They publicly called it a staged event and said Welch fits the pattern of a patsy. Even after his death in the 2025 traffic stop that I just told you about, a few folks online still say he was silenced or that the whole saga was a setup. But those theories never got big traction. Most Pizzagate believers just called him a well-meaning guy who got tricked, not a government plant. My gut feeling is that this was all a stage. Look, I'm just theorizing here. It's okay. But it was to discredit the narrative of a very real and serious evil that happens of harming children at every level, unfortunately, of our institutions in this country and around the world. And so earlier when I was saying alleged symbols that could be like pedophilic, let's go now to the 2007 FBI intelligence bulletin that describes exactly those symbols. It's titled "The Symbols and Logos Used by Pedophiles to Identify Sexual Preferences." I'm sure you've seen this online before. It was leaked, and it's worth knowing, especially for parents. You know, like you'll see these things. You'll see them in the world. Sometimes people just use them; they don't know. You know, but I do think a lot of really evil people do use symbols to communicate. And you'll see them also hide it in games, in like video games or children's movies. You'll see it. Once you see this list, you'll see it all the time. You have to discern. So it was leaked on WikiLeaks, and it's real and unclassified law enforcement sensitive document from the FBI's Innocent Images Unit. So for like what they call a boy lover, there's a small blue spiral triangle inside a bigger triangle. That's one you see a lot. For little boy lover, there's the same thing, but with a rounded childlike corners, which is like kind of like it's like curves, and you see that one a lot too. Girl lover is two hearts, one inside the other. Child lover looks like a butterfly. So again, these are images that are used by pedophiles to identify sexual preferences, both online and offline. The document says they're used on jewelry, coins, rings, and websites so pedophiles could recognize each other without saying anything out loud. So there's a little bit of evidence there from the FBI about how they speak in code, almost like they might say things like CP or cheese pizza. People who are believers of the Pizzagate theory pointed to the spiral triangle logo on Comet Ping Pong's signs and menu, plus some triangle shapes in nearby businesses, and said, this seems to be the same kind of symbol from 10 years prior that you guys were saying were associated with this. Interesting. The FBI document was about tiny activist groups using them on secret jewelry, and not about public restaurant signs, say the skeptics. Okay. A lot of people write that off. A lot of people like to write off the idea of cheese pizza. Like I've discussed this on IRL with Tim a while ago, and I'm like, dude, he didn't think, I don't know where he is now with it, but he, at the time, he was like, they were talking, I think he was saying they were using coded language to talk about drugs or something. And when I heard that post me doing the story in Ohio with Alex Rosen catching pedophiles, I spent 3 days looking through all these messages of all these different men who were demonic using this lingo, using CP Like they were writing it out using cheese pizza emojis, writing out pizza, writing out cheese pizza. So I was like, look, I mean, I'm watching in real life these men meeting up with what they think is a little girl after having written to other people in like chat rooms who are also demons using this very same lingo. You could also say, well, maybe they're only using, okay, sure, but maybe they're only using the lingo because it became popularized after Pizzagate. But there are, like I said, okay, so cheese pizza is not in that document. Those are other symbols, but there are cases of it being used prior to that, and we'll get to that at some point. I have it on my list here. I'm getting there. Oh, it's right here. Good. See, I thought I had. Cheese pizza, or CP as slang for child pornography, has been real on the internet, used as code since the early 2000s, and it's been found on forums like 4chan and AOL. People use it to talk about child sexual abuse material without typing the actual words. And then we are moving up through the early teens into 17 and then up to 2023 and 2025. New Jersey corrections officer Salamak posted on Craigslist, this is in 2017 now, so the same time as Pizzagate, looking for women and moms that are into cheese pizza. An undercover cop responded, got his email, found child porn images of young girls, and arrested him for receiving images of sexual abuse. Of child sexual abuse. That was an officer, a corrections officer. 2023, more recent one, Michael Michiari, this is a federal case. Court complaint explicitly says he and others use cheese pizza and CP as code for child pornography because they avoid typing the full term. He was charged with distributing it. Take a little tea break real quick, rather. Some of this stuff is going to be hard to read. And I don't really like reading this, but if we're talking about Pizzagate, we kind of have to like go through a lot of this stuff. So I'm sure everyone knew clicking on this, the kind of subject matter we'd be getting into, it gets worse. As early as recent as last year, Monroe County paramedic Nathan Westbrook arrested for sharing child porn through a messaging app. Court records note he used cheese pizza as a euphemism for child pornography. Most common way it's caught now is online child protection activists and police monitor Instagram and other platforms for cheese slice emoji, like I was just telling you about, pizza emoji combos and bios, usernames, or comments. In 2020, one activist got thousands of accounts shut down after spotting these patterns. Australian police and others now list it in their official guides for parents. So it's okay to take it seriously when they talk like this. It is legitimate slang used by these demons, and it's documented in court papers and police records. But it's also been, I think, sometimes over-applied to people that might not be using it in the way that we know demons use it. Because sometimes people just use it. So that's why I'm saying, like, we kind of have to discern, how are people using it, how's it being used, but the image is not good. And you'll see it everywhere. Now, here are some very real cases involving child trafficking. This is not an exhaustive list. Obviously this can go on for a long time. Some of them are child trafficking, some of them are trafficking, but they hover around this world, this diabolical world. And of course, we'll start with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, Melania's friends. Epstein trafficked dozens of underage girls, some as young as 14, across his properties in New York, Palm Beach, New Mexico, and his private island. Maxwell was convicted in 2021 on 5 counts, including sex trafficking of a minor and conspiracy, and sentenced to 20 years. I think she's gonna get pardoned. At the rate things are going, I would expect her to get pardoned, which would be insane. Insane. But, dude, someone's telling Trump what to do, and it's not good things. Backpage.com, I was referencing the other day to you guys because that came up in my investigation into the Long Island serial killer, because a lot of the victims that he procured from Backpage. That was a website hosted the majority of online child sex ads in the U.S. Its founders and executives were convicted of money laundering and tied to promoting prostitution, including of minors. One founder got 5 years, others got 10. That site was seized in 2018. It was gone. A lot of those hookers were also using like Craigslist. FBI Operation Cross Country. This has been ongoing since 2003. Multi-year, multi-city stings, recovering hundreds of child victims and arrest hundreds of traffickers. 1 year alone recovered 149 underage victims and arrested 153 pimps. The program, like, this is insane. The program recovered over 4,800 children. What the? Trying to curse, but that is insane. It's insane. Amador Cortez Meza, the Amador Cortez Meza ring, Mexican national, running a ring smuggling young girls from Mexico into Georgia and forcing them into prostitution. Convicted in 2010, sentenced to 40 years. Okay, we're not that. I got more. I got a lot more here, but I'm saying this to put this in context of why it's reasonable to think that children, unfortunately, are being trafficked at even the places like the capital of our country. But especially there, because that's where so many demons go, because they love to work there and have power over us and make laws that are insane and control you. The Nexium cult leader Keith Raniere was convicted in 2019 of sex trafficking children as young as 12 through a secret master slave program. That's in quotes, master slave program. He got 120 years. Several high-profile Hollywood and business names were connected, which is why I have this here, because if it's going to happen at every institution, why would we let them call us crazy for thinking this could happen in D.C.? Hollywood's involved, DC's involved, teachers are involved, churches are involved, police are involved. I mean, it doesn't mean they're all bad and that everyone in these institutions are bad. Obviously. It means that no place is exempt from this. This evil will worm its way into every place it can, unfortunately, especially into places where it has access to children. Which is why, as parents, you have to do some serious vetting and be very observant of what you're seeing in the world around your kids and everywhere you go. There's a healthy paranoia that you need to exhibit in this fallen, deranged, depraved world. Ruby Franke, popular YouTube mom convicted in 2024 of child abuse after starving and torturing her children. Her business partner Jody Hildebrand got 4 to 60 years each. Fast food and massage parlor rings. In 2023 and 2024, the FBI busted rings operating inside massage parlors and strip clubs in California, Florida, and Texas. In one Atlanta case, over 20 girls, from the ages of 14 to 17, I want to punch my computer, were rescued from hotels and truck stops. What drives me crazy is thinking about the family that doesn't know where their kids went. Some of them come from really bad backgrounds, and maybe they don't have anyone missing them, which is unfortunate, but it happens more often than you think. And a lot of the women that wound up murdered by the Long Island serial killer were women from backgrounds like that. Like, maybe their little sister missed them, but they didn't have great families. But a lot of these kids are also just abducted. And like it says here, these little girls, so when they were caught, they were 14 to 17. You don't know how long they've been in there. You don't know how long they've been abducted. You don't know where they came from. We could find out after some time. But what we do know, I can tell you now, is they were rescued from hotels and truck stops. Truck stops are a major place for trafficking. Cartel-linked smuggling. MS-13 and Mexican cartels trafficked girls across the southern border. In 2024 alone, ICE reported rescuing 180 minors from trafficking in Texas and California, many tied to cartel pipelines. We know, they've lost over 300,000 children over the southern border when Kamala, our border czar, was in charge. Where am I? Okay, I said that. Okay. Around late 2016 now, I want to just put now in context the time that Pizzagate was blowing up in the news. So those stories jump around in time that I just told you about. Those very real court documented cases of child trafficking. We're looking around, that was mostly in the past just 20, 25 years. We know this goes on way longer. It's going on right now, which is so unfortunate, but just want to put those there now as we zoom in a little more to what was going around at this time around late 2016 when Pizzagate and Comet Ping Pong were really blowing up online. Here's what was actually in the news about child trafficking. So October 2016, just weeks before the election and right as Podesta emails dropped, the FBI wrapped up what I just told you about, Operation Cross Country X, rescuing 82 underage victims and arrested 239 pimps and traffickers across 106 U.S. cities. It was their biggest one yet, and the results got reported by mainstream outlets, but obviously that kind of died down and didn't get wrapped up into story. You could hate conspiracy theories. You could hate Alex Jones. You could hate Trump. You could hate the person who came up with the idea of Comet Ping Pong being part of trafficking. But if you're a good reporter, you could at the very least be like, I could include in my story that just a month or two ago, an insane FBI headed task force, Operation Cross Country X, rescued all these underage kids. These kids, not underage kids, kids. They rescued these kids in 106 U.S. cities. You could just put that there to be like, then maybe I understand why people would think this. But as far as I have seen, I have never seen an article like that. I've never seen an article like that. Because they won't let themselves do it. Because it gives just a little bit of credence to the idea that something like Comet Ping Pong or Pizzagate exists. They ignore it willfully. Because they hate you. And they hate that you care so much about protecting the innocent. They hate you. If I'm wrong and you know an article that does that thing where they might hate conspiracy theories and they hate the idea that you're wrapping up the Comet thing and Pizzagate, but they do show examples of this. I haven't seen them. Please do share those links below so people can hear a little more context outside of what I'm saying. But can you imagine, though? That's October 2016. The next month is the election. The month after is Pizzagate. It's suspicious to me. Throughout 2016, ICE announced that they had arrested nearly 2,000 human traffickers nationwide and helped rescue 400 victims. Comet Ping Pong itself was getting death threats and online harassment in November and early December, but no actual trafficking news tied to it. So they say, just a conspiracy. Okay. On the Epstein front, in 2016, there wasn't much going on. That would be another 3 years, right? He's arrested in 2019, I believe, and dies. Witness protection. But we are now at 2016, 8 years after he is convicted. 8 years after he's in jail with his sweetheart deal in Florida. He can keep a passport. He can come and go as he pleases. And the public wasn't really talking about it all that much until Miami Herald's amazing article. I thought, I'd like to reread it because I wonder how I would think about it now. It's because I haven't read it since November 2018. So 2 years later from Pizzagate, that article drops. I remember being like, holy crap. It's an amazing article. I'm due to reread that. And then 2019 was the Epstein arrest. In 2016, I think I might have this written down here somewhere, but I think he bought a new island that year. I'm not really trying to say Epstein's involved with this, as I do think it's possible. In terms of trafficking children through DC, I think we know that was probably real. I'm not trying to say he's connected to Comet Ping Pong, although I'm allowed to think maybe perhaps that there's some truth there. But I just want, since he is the bigger name involved with child trafficking and evil to that degree, I want to put it in context and on a timeline of what he's up to, or what the idea of Epstein was even like around the time of Pizzagate. Kind of hushed around that point. We're 8 years, almost a decade past his sweetheart deal, and no one's really talking about it. It would be another 2 years until it became mainstream again. I mean, Alex Jones was talking about it, but and other people, obviously, but not at the level we talk about it now, or the past 5 years. I was curious, thinking about 2016 and the time of Pizzagate and the Epstein files, if there was any type of like mention of Pizzagate. I can't find any. If you found something, let me know. We know there's mentions of pizza. We'll get to that in a second, which is how we got here. This is how we got here, with J.D. Vance referencing that. But in Epstein released emails, we know he was talking mostly around about the presidential election at this time. In October 2016, he emailed artist Andres Serrano saying there was no good choice in the election. Serrano replied that he was disgusted by the grab them by the PUSSY quote from Trump, and might even give Trump, but might give Trump a sympathy vote. The moral authoritarians here. He also emailed billionaire Peter Thiel a short note about, it said, Trump delegate fun. And I want to pause right there real quick, because I neglected to say something earlier I wanted to say when it comes to Vance. And it wasn't in the MSN article, from his quote last night at this TPUSA function. He says, I want to investigate all these people. And, you know, he calls Epstein a scumbag. And if I were in that crowd, if I had a microphone, I'd be like, well, then are you willing to investigate your father, Peter Thiel, who was super close with Epstein? I mean, they had a lot of emails back and forth. So if you're willing to tell us he's a scumbag, and now you want, because you're trying to ingratiate yourself into a crowd that you know hates Epstein, rightfully so, and wants accountability. So then where does your big funder, your tech daddy Peter Thiel fall into all that? They were clearly friends. Maybe still are. Epstein and Thiel, that is. We know around this time, around summer of 2016, that he was spending a few weeks at Zorro Ranch, which is where he was doing who knows what, his baby factory. Or would they say they were looking for 2 bodies? That story died. That might be buried there of girls. They didn't say what age. We don't know. And yeah, he bought his second private island, Great St. James, next to Little St. James, in 2016. Pizza, however, I mean, I have this all written out, so I'm at the section where it's just like a lot of pizza, and it's alarming how many times it's written here. I mean, I have it too many times on my page, but it shows up, from what I can tell, approximately 1,000 to 1,500 times across the files. Pizza. And depending on how you read it, you could take it literally or you could take it figuratively. In 2015, it is an email requesting the menu from Pizza Amore, which is a real pizzeria in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, near Epstein Island. Okay, maybe that's just pizza. I don't know. In May 24, 2017, he had an automated reminder, send pizza to Bobby, which is in reference to Bobby Slayton, a comedian that was staying at Epstein's New York City townhouse. That's weird. I think that's weird. March 31st, 2018, a urologist, Harry Fish, texted him pizza and grape soda. Enough said. Epstein replies, go no, KNO. So that is who J.D. Vance is referencing from the top of the episode. April 2018. These are just a few times that pizza shows up. Let's go for pizza and grape soda again. No one else can understand. May 24, 2018, Fish follows up with a photo of actual pizza and grape soda after a Viagra discussion. What's that about? Epstein emails Leon Black, "You are not running a pizza place, a Pilates studio in Queens." August 2018, Nathan Mervold emails Epstein that he's going to Italy to research a book on pizza, which became the real book, Modernist Pizza. So perhaps that is just a literal pizza right there, but some of those with the grape soda, I don't know. There were instances throughout and after Pizzagate where some people with platforms in media mocked or dismissed the idea of Pizzagate. I'd like to read you about two of them right now. We have James Gordon Meek, a former ABC News investigative journalist. He pleaded guilty in 2023 to possessing and transporting child sexual abuse material. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. A 2017 ABC story he co-wrote about Russian propaganda briefly mentioned Pizzagate as an example of a hoax, but he never wrote a dedicated debunking piece or mocked the theory publicly. But he did co-write this thing talking about Pizzagate being one of these hoaxes. Pretty interesting. But you do have to be careful because there are viral memes that call him the journalist that debunked Pizzagate. And that's not entirely true. He did write something that does call Pizzagate a hoax. So now it's worth looking at a sort of adjacent story to Pizzagate and thinking now the context, the time we're dealing with. September 2016, the FBI investigates former Congressman Anthony Weiner for sending explicit messages and photos to a 15-year-old girl in North Carolina. They got a search warrant for his devices, for iPhone, iPad, and a laptop he shared with his wife, Huma Abedin, who was Hillary Clinton's aide. Isn't Huma married to Soros now? Are they together? The son? On that laptop, agents quickly spotted a huge number of emails. Reports range that the numbers in the vicinity of 141,000 to like 650,000. It's a pretty big discrepancy. Many involving Huma Abedin's Clinton-related accounts. Some had domains like clintonemail.com, state.gov, and hillaryclinton.com. So, pretty wild. The original warrant was only for evidence of sexting with a minor and child exploitation, so they couldn't fully dig into the Clinton emails without a new warrant. FBI leadership in New York notified headquarters right away. There was a delay of several weeks while they figured out legal steps. On October 28, 2016, 11 days before the election, FBI Director James Comey sent a letter to Congress saying they'd found emails that appeared to be pertinent to the closed Clinton email investigation. He reopened the probe. Comey closed it again on November 6th, saying nothing new changed their earlier conclusion that Hillary Clinton shouldn't be charged. That was wild times, people. Wild times. What they actually found on the laptop, mostly duplicates of emails, because I guess a lot of those, the big number of emails happens to be a lot of duplicates. Personal emails, some classified emails, but this is where the Pizzagate and that early QAnon stuff kind of overlaps with the claim of child trafficking and a major child trafficking ring with DC that's connected to Clinton, Podesta, and others, the Frazzled drip. And that's when the NYPD allegedly, I think they probably did, found horrific child pornography and snuff films on a folder for called Life Insurance with a video named Frazzle Drip. That connects in a way to Epstein because it would be a sort of blackmail, like I can hold this over someone's head, like you did this, we have it on video, we'll release this, you do what we say. Kind of like the emails that Epstein would send himself about Bill Gates with like the STDs and the Russian hooker and stuff. But the whole Epstein business model, we'll say, is kind of built on the idea of blackmail, as far as we could tell. Supposedly showing Clinton and Abedin, this is what's in the Frazzle Drip, for those who don't know, and this, from here on out, this gets worse and worse, so if you're faint of heart, maybe not for the best for you. But it, allegedly, the Frazzled Drip video depicts Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin torturing and murdering a child in a satanic ritual, wearing her face as a mask. There are claims that New York Police Department officers were so traumatized that they took their lives. I don't know. We could look around and say we found records of NYPD officers taking their lives around this time, but there's been nothing officially reported on that. And I don't know. I don't think they would. So they tied it. It was tied directly to Pizzagate. That this was more evidence of that. I think it is evidence. I don't know if it's evidence directly for Comet Pizza, but clearly this is evidence of people in D.C., people who are in Congress, who are senators, even presidents, are demonic, and they seek to harm kids. That's exactly what that was. Man, it's also, if you haven't seen the video of Andrew Breitbart getting involved, because that Breitbart broke that story, and I think he got the images from Twitter DMs. I forget the specifics, how it started and how Breitbart got involved, but I believe he broke the story or maybe just accelerated it. But classic Breitbart. Wiener, of course he's named that too. He'd been denying all of this. He said he was hacked. Nothing was real. And I don't want to say his last name. It's ridiculous. But Anthony Weiner was going to have a press conference. Andrew Breitbart happened to have just flown into New York before the press conference during that week of all this insanity. But he didn't know about the press conference, so the story goes. But he heard about it when he landed, and he said, well, I'm going to go. He's going to cause a stink. He gets there before Anthony takes the stage. And Breitbart takes the stage. This is all on camera. And he fields questions because people are now like, he's the guy who's been talking about this. It's classic. It's great. And despite how dark the subject matter is, I mean, it's just like, this is what some good journalism is. You kind of have to be a wrecking ball sometimes. And Anthony Weiner goes on stage, I think later, that like maybe just right after, and then confesses to lying and all that stuff, and that was all real. I could be off on a few of those details, but I believe that was all one day. I mean, it started, I think, that week with the alleged being hacked, and Breitbart sharing the images that Weiner had sent, and I think that all happened like that week, and the press conference was all one day. Crazy. Hillary Clinton was recently asked about Frazzled Drip at that deposition. That just got glossed over. But it's insane that we had a former First Lady, a former Secretary of State asked about Frazzled Drip. And you might remember if you saw that clip that she held her face in despair. But it was just such a weird thing to do, in my opinion. I know I'm coming to this with my own confirmation biases, but it seemed like muscle memory, if you know what I mean. So people, again, when it comes to Pizzagate or Frazzled Drip, they'll say they'll write it off, make you sound crazy. Don't say those things. It's insane. They'll mock you. You get ridiculed. But these things happen. There are very real instances of satanic ritual abuse. 100%. It's unfortunate, but we are in a fallen world. And there are people who like to harm innocent. So this is where it gets really worse. Because I want to try to make context here. We're talking about Frazzled Drip. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's possible. Anything's possible. But here are some real, horrible nightmare scenarios from court documents of prolonged child torture and murder in this country. I don't like reading this stuff. I just got done yesterday saying I don't like saying things out loud, about a friend who passed away. And here I am doing the opposite. I think it's necessary in this context for people, should they watch this or share this with someone who ridicules the idea that we think there are satanic pedophile rings that have infected every institution of this country, that we have to show them these things do happen to children. And it is unfortunately reasonable to think this happens more than we'd like to know. And so these aren't going to be political scandals. These are more in the civilian world, let's say. Shanda Vander Ark, Michigan, 2024. She and her older son systematically tortured her 15-year-old disabled son, Timothy Ferguson, for months. Starved him. He got down to only 69 pounds. Forced him into ice-cold bath for hours. Poured hot sauce on his genitals and in his mouth. They shackled him, deprived him of food and water, and he died in July 2022. She was convicted of first-degree murder and child abuse, sentenced to life without parole. The judge called it deliberate systematic torture. So why am I making everyone hear this? To reinforce this idea that there are really evil people who will do this for pleasure. There is no other reason. This is a demonic urge that these people seek to satisfy by harming and or killing the innocent. And unfortunately, this demonic urge is in all types of people. It is in our politicians. It's in some teachers. It's in police officers. Eddie Lee Sexton, this was in Florida and Ohio in the 90s. The father of 12, Eddie, terrorized his family for years. He sexually abused his daughters, forced them into incest, and psychologically controlled them so completely that some of his children murdered at his command. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. He later died in prison. And his wife got life for sexual abuse and complicity. Lancaster, this is in California, 2025. Maurice Jewel Taylor Sr. and Natalie Sumiko Brothwell stabbed and decapitated their 13-year-old daughter and 12-year-old son in 2020. They then forced their two younger sons, aged 8 and 9, to look at the bodies and kept them locked in bedrooms without food for days. Both parents got life without parole for the murders and child abuse. It's horrific. These are horror movies in real life. But unfortunately, I do need to add more context here. We're going to go to the political realm. Not going to be crimes like that, but crimes that hurt the innocent. These are politicians who were actually charged, pled guilty, or convicted of possessing child pornography or sexually abusing and molesting minors. I tried to just make a list here of verified cases only. We know there's more accusations. We know there's a lot more going on than we like to know. Dennis Hastert, who's a Republican, former Speaker of the U.S. House, admitted in court to sexually abusing at least 4 boys as young as 14 when he was their high school wrestling coach in the 1970s. He couldn't be charged for the abuse because the statute of limitations had expired, so he was convicted in 2016 of financial crimes tied to paying hush money to one victim. The judge called him a serial child molester, and he served only 13 months in prison. I know. Statute of limitations, I know. It's tough. These are tough. Should have been longer. We have, obviously, Anthony Weiner, Democrat, former U.S. Congressman from New York. In 2017, he did plead guilty to transferring obscene material to a minor after sexting a 15-year-old girl for weeks, sending her explicit photos and asking for sexual images. He was sentenced to 21 months in federal prison, served about 18 months, and he is a registered sex offender who has a job at the radio station WABC. Why? Patrick Bet David had him on the show, and he did ask him about the Frazzled trip. That was interesting. He had a meltdown. R.J. May, Republican, former South Carolina state rep. In 2025, he pleaded guilty to 5 counts of distributing child sexual abuse material. He used the username Joe Biden NNN69 on Kick to trade hundreds of videos of toddlers and young children being abused. Sentenced in January 2026 to 17 and a half years in federal prison. He had sponsored bills to protect children while committing these crimes. Mike Fulmer, Republican, former Pennsylvania state senator, arrested in 2019, pleaded guilty to 3 counts of possessing child pornography found on his cell phone, sentenced in 2020 to 1 to 2 years in county jail, plus 8 years probation and 15 years on the sex offender registry. Ray Holmberg, Republican, longest-serving North Dakota state senator, in 2025, pleaded guilty to traveling to Prague multiple times to pay for sex with minor boys, sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Again, we are here building context. Politicians, D.C., Pizzagate, child trafficking, Satan over D.C., governing this wicked planet. There are so many examples of this. It's insane. Stacey Marie Lawton, Democrat, former New Hampshire state rep, first openly transgender state rep in the U.S. in 2025, pleaded guilty to 3 counts of sexual exploitation of children, currently awaiting sentencing. Keith Farnham, Democrat, former Illinois state rep, pleaded guilty in 2014 to distributing child pornography. Federal agents found over 2,750 images and videos of child sexual abuse material, some involving infants, on computers in his legislative office and home. Sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, he died in prison in 2017. Mel Reynolds, Democrat, former U.S. congressman from Illinois, convicted in 1995 on 12 counts, including sexual assault of a minor, solicitation of child pornography, and obstruction of justice. He had a sexual relationship with a 16-year-old campaign volunteer. What the F? Sentenced to prison and resigned from Congress. Stephen Jabor, Democrat, former chairman of the Victoria County Democratic Party in Texas, pleaded guilty to receiving and possessing child pornography. Sentenced in 2011 to 14 years and 2 months in federal prison, followed by lifetime supervised release and sex offender registration. Mix there of Democrats and Republicans. All right. So we know this has been going on. It's been going on. It's happening right now, unfortunately. And despite how much I don't trust the FBI, the people running it, I do also believe there are people in the FBI who do care and want to help rescue children. I've gone over multiple reports here of the FBI rescuing kids. We hope that continues to happen. This is an ancient evil. The earliest documented cases of child trafficking go back to ancient times, when selling or enslaving children was a common and often legal. In ancient Rome, this is around 100 BC to 400 AD, poor parents routinely sold their children into slavery or servitude for cash, which is also something I believe happens with a lot of these kids who go missing. I don't doubt that they come from such bad backgrounds that their parents are selling them. A horrible thing to think about. The Roman writer Augustine explicitly noted that indignant parents selling their children because they needed the cash. This was widespread. It's a rough translation. This was widespread enough to be referenced in legal and philosophical texts of that era. The Greek island of Delos, this is 2nd to 1st century BC, was one of the biggest slave trading hubs in the ancient Mediterranean. Up to 10,000 slaves, including many children, were bought and sold on that island in a single day, shipped in from wars, raids, and poverty across the region. It was a massive organized market. Which then you must think about. We'll go back to the Epstein files. First day we covered Epstein files on this show. We did 2 weeks straight, every day. We could do it ad infinitum. But on the first day, we talked about Turkey opening up an investigation into child trafficking that happened in the late 90s after the earthquake. Same thing. We hear them talk about extracting wealth from dying nations, about extracting wealth from war, about manufacturing war. They're doing it today. They did it then. We can look at medieval Europe, 500 to 1500 AD. This pattern of child trafficking continued. Parents could legally, I guess they wouldn't have obviously defined it as trafficking because it was legal to do it then. But the idea of getting rid of your children is nothing new. Parents could legally sell their young sons into servitude, and children were routinely bought and sold or gifted as part of an estate transactions and monastic records. In the 7th century, in Visigothic Spain, laws even regulated how many slave boys and girls could be included in noble dowries. So there's lists, there's like receipts for this stuff. From 1719 to 1732, French Louisiana, the French government and Mississippi Company forcibly shipped over 1,100 poor French children and teens, some as young as 14, from orphanages and streets in Paris to populate the colony. That's literally state-sponsored trafficking, which I think is what was going on with the border, with our border czar and Kamala. Might still be going on, I hope not, but at least it's a little better. 18th century Britain, impoverished parents sold children into chimney sweeping or prostitution. Prices were often high because the children were seen as valuable labor. In short, child trafficking isn't new. This is a horrible evil that has been going on for ages. And now with the proliferation of the internet, it accelerates the ability for people to traffic. The internet is a truck stop. And people are trafficking children, unfortunately, maybe more today than they were before the internet. So that is a rundown to the best of my ability. After I saw that clip this morning, I wanted to throw that together and have something in one place, some context, some examples, some references to court documents and articles, theories plus documents, because sometimes that's all we have. But I never want to mock or ridicule people who think that who know there is a reality to this. I'm one of them. I'm sure a lot of you are too. And we are trying our best as parents to create a world that our children will be confident and safe in. And a lot of that comes from having faith. A lot of that comes from understanding how we navigate evil, how we defend ourselves from so much evil that's in this world, that's inescapable. The evil is unfortunately everywhere, but you cannot forget that is still beautiful out there. Despite all this stuff, I know this is a very dark episode, but despite all of that knowledge, all of this, all the very real instances of these things that happen to children, it's still like we're so blessed to be here. And this is a beautiful world, despite how grotesque it is. It's just a crazy thing we have to balance as humans. But I don't want to forget that. I'm not trying to lose sight of that. I think knowing this helps us have more confidence and power in our lives. It doesn't mean we have to be obsessive or drive ourselves crazy, but you do need a healthy amount of paranoia. I think that's legitimate and reasonable. Thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate it. If you have someone, friend or family who mocks it and you think this is a decent rundown, let them know. Send the link. We have this now. Maybe not the best rundown. I just kind of threw this together this morning, but it's something. And with Pizzagate now being entertained by the vice president, we are in very unprecedented times. And all for very various reasons, like I said. This is a reality. This is a real evil. But also there are people in power that are trying to ingratiate themselves into the dissident and conspiracy-minded crowd. We have to balance both those at the same time and be very observant and very aware of what's going on. So thank you guys. Appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, comment, share this with everyone you can. And it's always a pleasure seeing you all in the chat. And I will see you tomorrow. Thank you to everyone at Rumble and YouTube. And have a blessed night.